So you are Eskom Limited, South Africa's biggest energy producer and supplier. You are among the top utilities in the world in terms of generation capacity and sales. You produce and supply around 95% of the country's energy and around 45% of the total energy in Africa. And as of 2020, your revenue peaked at 1.35 billion rands. And if that's not enough, the South African government is your biggest and only investor. And as a company, everything should be going great for you. Except it isn't. The billion-dollar power stations that you built are failing. The country you are responsible for supplying energy to is plunged into a massive periodic power cut that only seems to get worse as the years progresses. And to add insults to injury, you acquire a massive debt that you know for certain you will never be able to pay off. Or so you thought. The year is 1882 and most of the power distributed in South Africa is either owned by municipalities or by private entities. This posed a problem for the South African government because whenever changes had to be made, it was required that they go through various intermediaries to achieve this. And so, in 1923, Eskom was born under the Electricity Act of 1922. After its birth, Eskom quickly took control over all the power production in the country, buying out all the independent power producers and built its very first power station, the Khongela Power Station, in 1928. Soon, the true power of Eskom will be seen as it was able to buy out the Victoria Falls and the Transvaal Power Station in 1948 for a whopping 285 million. With all this financial power, Eskom emerged as the biggest energy supplier on the continent of Africa. It not only produced enough energy for the country, but more than enough to sell its excess supply to neighboring countries like Zimbabwe, Zambia and Malawi for extra revenue. At its peak, Eskom was bringing in billions of rands in the country, as well as providing sufficient electricity at that. However, this will all come to change in the years that follows, mainly due to the fall of the apartheid government. In 1994, when the ANC took power, there were unfortunate changes at Eskom, some of them predictable, some of them surprising. Race-based affirmative actions, political interferences, and political appointments were predictable. Highly skilled and experienced white engineers, managers, and technicians were given generous packages to get out and make way for the persons of the correct skin color and political affiliation. This was sometimes known as space creation. The unexpected changes were even worse. The ANC had long been regarded as a Marxist in the outlook and was expected to favor state-run institutions. To everyone's surprise, they soon began to talk about the Eskom being unbundled or privatized. The state also seemed intent on taking away Eskom's obligations to supply, and in 1998 it forbade Eskom to build new power stations. Meanwhile, the country was running out of electricity. After 1993, growth in electricity demand as a ratio of economic growth fell from a 2-to-1 ratio to a 1-to-1, but remained very steady at this ratio. Electricity demand was growing in tandem with the economy, and the country's surplus electricity was steadily and predictably shrinking to nothing. While the government did order Eskom not to build more power stations, it seemed not to understand the problem whereas Eskom did, or should have. The new managers at Eskom, mainly political opponents, seemed to have little interest in ensuring future electricity supply. Instead, they were preoccupied with other goals such as racial transformation and keeping the prices of electricity artificially low for social purposes. Accountants replaced engineers at senior levels, and those accountants lost sight of Eskom's fundamental purpose, which is simply to provide electricity and cover its costs, not make a big profit or a high rate of return. Eskom became blighted with a damaging combination of ANC ideology and business school fashion. This was an extract from businesstech.co.za, published in 2014.